Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Let's Talk Ghost Gear webinar. This is our fourth episode, and we'll be focusing on technology for the prevention and mitigation of ALDFG. My name is Jackie McGarry, and I'm the program manager for the GGGI. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you in the past, but many of you are new faces to me. I'm excited to see so many of you and to hopefully be hearing from you soon. Uh, I also wanted to thank you for joining. As mentioned in previous episodes, we have this webinar series for two reasons. The first is we want to give our members a chance to showcase their work to other members and to a larger audience via our YouTube channel. This session and future sessions will be recorded for that purpose. And second, we want to give all of you a chance to connect with one another and hopefully spark some interesting conversations around ghost gear. We have 5 speakers today, each of whom will have about 7 to 10 minutes to present on their work. And then we'll open up for a panel discussion to encourage the audience to please ask questions. We'll be kind of watching, and if there's anything that we want to direct to one presenter or another, we'll do that throughout the course of our discussion. Our panelists today are Kathryn Gavira O'Neill, who is the head of science and sustainability at Satlink. Kathryn is based in Spain. Additionally, we have Stephen Jones, who's the chief business development officer for Ashored, a company out of Canada. Dr. Kortney Opshaug, who is the founder and CEO of Blue Ocean Gear in the United States. Richard Riels, who is also the founder and executive director for SMELTS in the US. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Helge Tretto Olsen, who is the CEO of RESQUNIT in Norway. As a reminder, panelists, if we could keep our presentations under 10 minutes, I'll let you know when it has been 7 minutes in the chat. And then at 10 minutes, I'll jump in and say, thank you so much. We're going to move on so that we have enough time for everybody to present. And I think that that's enough from me for now. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Kathryn.
Well, first of all, hi everyone, and big thanks to GGGI and Jackie and Laura and all of you for organizing this webinar and including us for speaking today. I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's presentations. So I'm Kathryn Gavira. I'm the head of Satlink's Science and Sustainability Department. And today we want to present to you some of the ways we're working with our technology to solve some of the issues that exist around ALDFG. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know Satlink, we're a global technology provider with a special focus on supplying both fishermen and regulators with tools that ensure sustainability of their operations or help them better manage ocean resources. We always work really closely with our clients to make sure that our solutions fit exactly what they need. So that means that we actively engage with governments, with RFMOs, and with the industry to develop the best possible solutions. Sustainability is without a doubt the underlying theme to everything we develop, but we are very well aware that we're not able to resolve the challenges that the world's oceans are facing on our own. But we have a really long track record of collaboration with different stakeholders, and we've actually been able to coordinate and develop quite a few different projects to improve our own or our clients' practices and reduce our footprint overall. So today what I want to share with you is one of these such projects. It's called Project Recon, which we first developed with Tangaroa Blue Foundation, who's also a GGGI member, and how this project contributes to reducing the impact of abandoned, lost, or discarded fishing gear. Next slide, please. So Project Recon is essentially a circular economy scheme. It's built around one of our products, which are satellite-linked eco-sounder buoys. These are commonly used by industrial purse-seine tuna fishing fleets for monitoring their drifting fish aggregating devices, or DFADs, as some of you might know them, while they're at sea. Now, as the name indicates, DFADs are drifting. So even though they're monitored and they can be recovered thanks to the GPS system on these buoys, they can sometimes drift out of the areas of operation of the vessels that are using them and end up on shore. In the last couple of years, this is something we've been discussing internally, how to deal with this fact and prevent any kind of impacts in the best way possible. And at the same time, Tangaroa Blue Foundation in Australia had actually found some of these satellite buoys on their beach cleanups. And they were wondering if there would be a way that they could potentially use them. Now, the way the buoys work, they can generally only be used by the original owner. So without the support of the fishing fleet, we couldn't actually let anybody else use them. So we really needed a way to involve the fishing industry as well. So this is how, about a year ago, Project Recon was born. We started out in Australia with Tangaroa Blue Foundation, but we are actually establishing a network of local partners, so a global network of different partners all over the place. These are generally organizations that are on the ground. Oftentimes they're carrying out beach cleanups or recovering the buoys on shore. And many of them could benefit from the technology of these buoys, but don't necessarily have the funds to purchase them when they're new. So through Project Recon, what we're doing is coordinating with these local partners every time they recover a buoy. We identify which of our industry partners the buoy comes from. And if they are part of Recon, then we work with the local partner to test the buoys, check that they're still functional, and work with them to repurpose it for new projects focused on sustainability or scientific research. Now, all of this I've just summarized in a few minutes sounds relatively simple, but trust me, there are a lot of moving parts to this project. But fortunately, we've had a really good uptake from the industry. They've been really participative. So far, we've got over 100 vessels that are participating in the project and more than 20 companies, and the number keeps growing. Same goes for our network of local partners. We started out with Tangaroa Blue Foundation in Australia, and now we're also working with the Nature Conservancy and SPC, and hopefully this is something that will keep growing in the future as well. So you might be wondering, if I'm not a fishing vessel, why would I even be interested in using one of these buoys? Well, the fact is there are a number of applications that they're good for, and it's been really interesting to work with the local partners to come up with new ideas on how to repurpose the buoy technology even beyond its original use. Next slide, please. So for instance, with Tangaroa Blue Foundation, we've been working to repurpose the buoys into ghost net trackers. So basically, when Tangaroa recovers a buoy through the Australian Marine Debris Network, they work with us to check that the GPS function still works and that they can communicate with the buoy. So for instance, ask for positions on demand and that sort of thing. Our buoys also have solar panels. So that means as long as they're out in the sun, they're basically good to go. They're pretty small. They're built to last. They're easy to manage on small boats. So Tangaroa has set up an awesome scheme where they distribute these ready-to-go recon buoys to small sailing vessels or diving boats that are working on the reef, so that if these boats come across a large agglomeration of marine debris, which is very often ALDFG, usually these little boats can't actually haul it up on deck and take it back to land. So typically what they would do is just report the ghost net's location and hope that it wouldn't move too far until someone could go out and retrieve it. However, with the recon buoys, what we're doing is we tag the net, which means that it can now be fully monitored from land. So now that lets us set up alerts if it comes close to a sensitive area, and it also allows a bigger vessel with the ability to retrieve that net to know exactly where they have to go to pick it up. So although Recon has only been running for about a year, Tangaroa have already retrieved more than 4 tons of ghost gear thanks to this system. And best of all, the buoys can actually be reused as many times as needed. So we're really excited to see, how much we'll be able to retrieve in the future. Next slide, please. Another organization that has joined Project Recon as a local partner this year is SPC, the Pacific Community. SPC work with many small island nations across the Pacific, and they were actually already running a data collection scheme about drifting fads to better understand what was coming to shore. In parallel, they also work on a lot of projects relating to food security, artisanal fisheries, and the like. So Project Recon and SPC were really a great match. Drifting fads counterparts are anchored fads, which have typically been used near islands or in productive waters by artisanal fishermen. However, anchored fads can sometimes come loose, and without anything to monitor them, there's no way of knowing where they went or recovering this actually quite expensive gear. So with SPC, what we've been working on is to repurpose the recon buoys they're recovering into anchored fad buoys. With the GPS positioning system, artisanal fishermen know exactly where the anchored fad is, so they can go out and check on it at any time. And of course, if it comes loose from the anchorage, we can set up an alert system that's going to instantly let people on shore know, so they can go out and recover it and avoid that AFAD turning into ALDFG. Also, a lot of our buoys have a functional eco sounder on them, and they can transmit biomass information over satellite. So this added feature allows fishermen to know how much fish might be under the fad, and then they can really save on fuel costs and decide whether or not it's worth their while to go out. So these are only a couple examples, but there are definitely plenty of ways these buoys can be reused and avoid them becoming marine pollution. We're really proud of Project Recon and its potential for turning what would be pollution into an asset for the organizations that are recovering them. But we also know this isn't the only solution. It's not always ideal to recover the buoys once they're already on shore. So how could we prevent them from even getting there in the first place? Next slide, please. So one solution that we've been working on with different organizations is the concept of Fad Watch. Some of you might be familiar with this concept, but for those of you that aren't, I'll just be really quick and make a summary. So through a Fad Watch system, what we achieve is a way to actually intercept drifting fads when they come close to shore. So that way we can avoid their impact on reefs or other sensitive environments. So basically, using the GPS function of the buoys that are attached to the drifting fad, we check where each fad is. On our end, what we do is we set up a geofence system so that any of those fads drift near an island, a reef, or any kind of specific area, their position is automatically shared with a shore party that can actually go out and intercept it and make sure that it's not going to wind up damaging any coastal ecosystems. This is a concept that was first launched by Opshaug, the Spanish fleet in the Seychelles Islands in 2017. It still continues today with involvement of even more of the European fleet in the Indian Ocean. And a couple of years ago, the Nature Conservancy actually replicated the approach in Palmyra over in the Pacific Ocean. And that's a project the US fleet and the European fleet are involved with. So we're really happy to be working with these organizations to set up these systems. And of course, we hope to work with others elsewhere to continue reducing the impacts of ALDFG. Next slide, please. So just before I finish up, I want to thank you all for the time and attention, and most of all, really encourage anyone to reach out if you'd like to know more about Recon, or you have ideas of, how we could collaborate. Maybe you think, oh, one of the buoys could be useful for you too. We are always open to working with different organizations. We'd really love to hear from you if you think that there's room for us to work together in the future. So yeah, you've got an email address there. Otherwise, feel free to write to Joel or anyone at GGGI. I'm sure they'll put us in touch. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. That was great. And I always love not just hearing from GGGI members, but like hearing about GGGI members working together on projects. That was really interesting. So thank you. And then while Laura gets the next presentation queued up, we are going to be hearing next from Stephen Jones, who, as I mentioned, is the Chief Business Development Officer for Ashored in Canada. So Stephen, once your slides are up, we'll be ready for you to take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was first invited to a GGGI event in Halifax at the end of this summer, and it was the first time that I attended a Go Skier event, and it was the first time that I presented Ashored at a non-commercial fishing event, and I realized at that time that Ashored really has to be a member of GGGI and give our support, and I'm pleased to announce that we are now an official member. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Next slide. So Ashored is a company. We're on the east coast of Canada in Nova Scotia, and basically we're solving problems in the commercial fisheries at an industry level through hardware, software, and data. We're a growing team. The company was formed in 2018. We now have about 20 people on staff, and we're all kind of have the same mindset that we need to leave the oceans in a better position than for the next generation. And as we know better, we have to do better is the company creed. Next slide. So we're addressing global problems. When we were established in 2018, there was a lot of press about the North Atlantic right whale. 2018-19 were particularly bad years for North Atlantic right whale populations, and we're addressing the issues of marine entanglements, and we're addressing the massive amount of ocean waste from commercial fishery. Another problem that we're addressing that isn't on this slide would be bycatch, which can account for up to 8 to 10% of global fishery stocks. So I don't need to go through the stats, but at a high level, these are some of the problems that our company is addressing. Next slide. And what we're doing is basically we're one of a handful of companies in the world that's basically removing vertical lines and buoys that are traditionally attached to fixed traps like crab and lobster and octopus and some others. And we're packaging those vertical lines and buoys in our device that sits on the ocean floor, and it's tethered to the existing traps that fishermen normally use. And then the line and buoy is basically called to the surface through an acoustic signal from the fishing vessel when it is required to check the traps. So for the majority of the time, the water column is free of vertical lines and buoys. That is one of the entanglement risks for marine species. Next slide. So it's kind of a multi-step approach. We have a gear tracking platform, sort of like an inventory system that shows the gear location on the bottom. The fishing vessel sends an acoustic signal through the water column that's received by our hydrophone receiver. In our case, that releases a magnetic key, which then causes the lid in the line to rise to the surface. The fishermen take this on board and then retrieve their traps as they normally would. Next slide. As you can imagine, we go through quite a lot of iterations. We're on probably iteration 4 or 5. The current product can go up to a depth of 350 meters. There's a deck box, a transducer. These are the various parts that make the system complete. Next slide. This is just a quick video of fishermen in the Bay of Fundy. Our company considers ourselves a blue glove certified. You can see these fishermen are using those big, thick blue gloves, and they wear them all the time. And so we're constantly working with fishermen to make the system as easy as possible, and they can arm it and disarm it relatively quickly without taking those blue gloves off. And so it's a fairly simple, robust solution. Next slide. Just some of our testimonials that I like. It's relatively simple, and it's a modern solution for a global problem. Next slide. So the benefits for lost and discarded fishing gear, there are some intuitive ones. I guess, if you don't have a vertical line and a buoy on the surface, therefore you don't have line cutting, either intentional or non-intentional, from propeller cutting. You don't have as much drag on the seafloor during storms. And the fishermen that I talked to, I don't want to get into all the reasons why a rope on command system would or would not be used, but in my opinion, this is a form of it's a technology that will dramatically reduce the amount of lost fishing gear. The problem is there's not enough systems in use for a long enough period of time for me to develop statistically and tell people that yes, it's going to reduce your lost gear in half. But we are about to undertake a project with the Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovations starting up next month, I hope, that's going to examine that exact problem. So we'll have rope on command fishing alongside traditional fishing and examine just how much the gear is affected by storms over the course of a fishing season, how much less gear is lost as a result of our technology. So that's coming up. Next slide. Other things that we're working on besides the gear itself is our Atlas software. So what goes in what it goes in the water column, where it is, how long it's been deployed, when it comes back on board. And we're working on other things such as like smart tags and super tags that can attach to the traps directly, so that when gear is lost, fishermen are notified that gear is lost. If you come across lost gear that has one of these tags, you can simply scan it with a cell phone and it will alert the registered owner of that trap that it's lost. So there's other things that we're working on that can or cannot be used with rope on command systems that will, I think, play a significant role in reducing the amount of lost gear. Next slide. So we can mark when gear goes in the water as a single trap or as a trawl, you can mark it, and its location is shown on the map. Next slide. You can just, yeah, and then this is one of my favorite photos. People like to, they ask me, does this really work? And this is a picture of a snow crab fisherman here in Nova Scotia that used our gear towards the end of the season when his fishing zone was closed, and he went out and caught his remaining quota. So that gentleman with his arm up in the air, his name is Mark, and he's sort of like the poster child for our gear at the moment. I think that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I am hearing lots of themes so far about collaboration with fishermen and collaboration with people with a lot of different needs to find solutions that work, which is really what the Triple GI is all about. So thank you so much. Next, we are going to be hearing from Kortney Opshaug, who is with Blue Ocean Gear. Kortney, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much. And wanted to thank the Triple GI and Jackie and Laura for putting this together and inviting me to be a part so we can talk about what we're doing at Blue Ocean Gear. Could we get the next slide, please? So just a quick intro on Blue Ocean Gear. We are in the San Francisco Bay Area. Started back in 2015, really looking towards how can we work with the fishing industry and create or enable some more sustainable practices. Really started focusing on the issue of lost gear and ghost gear, tackling that with our smart buoy systems somewhere around 2018. And a lot of that was understanding working with fishermen, really understanding what some of the issues were and how best to go about working towards preventing that problem. If we go to the next slide. This being a triple GI event, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about. Everyone kind of understands the issues around the impacts of losing gear. One thing that we did find early on from working with the fishing industry is that a lot of them, replacing gear might be something that they feel is a seasonal pain point, but a lot of them say, well, I don't necessarily lose my gear, I just have a hard time finding it. And what they mean is that they might spend hours out on the water and spending a lot of very expensive fuel looking for their gear in very challenging conditions, whether it's fog or rough seas or nighttime. So we set about developing the smart buoy system so that we could track gear out on the oceans, because if you can track something, you're less likely to lose it. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So again, spending a lot of time out on different fishing vessels. Part of what we do is understanding not just that lost gear is an issue, but understanding how it happens. And so the different ways that fishermen lose gear, how do they operate? What types of fisheries and what types of gear are being used can all contribute to different ways of gear being lost or difficult to find. And so taking all of the fishermen's inputs and really incorporating that into our designs, I think was really key in coming up with a solution. So if we'll go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about the smart buoys. So these are just small spherical buoys, about 7-inch diameter, hard shell, equipped with sensors that can let fishermen know where their gear is at all times, and they get an alert if something's gone wrong, like it's moved beyond a certain threshold or it's been underwater and just resurfaced. Any sort of anomaly that might have happened that means something's going wrong with their gear. They're designed to go on as what they call a trailer buoy or a kicker buoy to any type of main gear. And we really did want to design something that was versatile enough to put on any type of fixed gear. I think so there were a lot of size and shape constraints, really needed to be a very rugged design. And the data is transmitted either via radio or satellite back to our cloud database. And we have a lot of different ways that the fishermen can interact with that data, whether it's on their onboard chart plotter or getting SMS alerts if something unusual has happened. Yeah, we can go on to the next slide as well. Part of this also was realizing that fishermen need to know not just where their gear is, but what's going on with it. So has it been dragged by another vessel? Has it been washed away by a storm? Has it been entangled? Or has it been underwater? Surface gear goes underwater from strong tides or currents and pops up at a later time. So fishermen want to be able to use this type of information to time their trips better, to impact what their response is, and really, create a much more efficient operations for them. So this kind of informed all of the different sensors that we were able to put on board the smart buoys to make them work a little bit better for the fishermen. We can go on to the next slide, please. So we have customers, or we were able to launch in the market in 2021. We have customers all over North America, and then we've just started expanding into Australia and Europe. The thing that's been so fascinating is all the different gear types that can use the smart buoys and how they're using them in different ways. Some, in Alaska, it's all about fuel savings and being able to be more efficient out on the water. In New England, a lot more about ghost gear prevention and entanglement mitigation. Some folks are using them for gear theft detection, or so there's kind of a wide range of ways that fishers are using this technology and being able to see, and they're constantly coming up with new ways too. And I think that's kind of the best case scenario, is having fishermen say, well, but what about this? Could you make this happen, or could you change this interface, and really getting that feedback into our designs. Next slide, please. I think if you can click one more time, one of the things I just wanted to show, this is a quick video if it plays. Is, a lot, it's getting an appreciation of what kind of conditions are out on the water. This isn't close to shore, small artisanal fisheries. This is deadliest catch style water. So any technology that is designed needs to be very rugged. It needs to withstand being slammed against the side of the boat, being dropped on the deck, and go through hurricanes and tidal forces that will pull it down to 300 fathoms or more. So this will just keep going on loop. You can go to the next slide. But I just want to show a few examples of places that the smart buoys have been used. Another interesting one is the California swordfish fishery. This is fished a very interesting way. They use deep set buoys so that they can prevent bycatch, and using smart buoys attached to their gear lets them know, that lets them fish in more difficult conditions or at night, and a lot of times their lines are parted, and so they want to not lose their gear. So it's a very sustainable fishery, and we've been very happy to be able to work with them. The next slide, please. We also did some anchored FAD tracking in Vanuatu. This is a project led by the Global Ghost Gear Initiative with the Vanuatu Fisheries Department, and working closely with the department there on what can the buoy sense for them, and how we were even able to see the sensitivity of what happens after an earthquake, and so seeing how gear can shift in conditions that are unpredictable can be very useful for the harvesters that are going out and using the fishing aggregate devices. Next slide, please. So really just, our goal is to see, continue to expand into different fisheries. Again, really gaining a better understanding of how different fisheries operate, what types of gear can the smart buoys be useful on, and also now expanding the number of sensors that are on the buoys so that we can have data that's useful for the fisheries, not just during the season of where the gear is, but also post-season as to analyzing some of the fisheries behavior, and gear loss hotspots as well. We've started generating those for fisheries where we have a critical mass of gear that's instrumented with smart buoys. That is all I had. Thanks so much. I think the next slide has my email. So feel free to reach out if there's any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Kortney. Another great presentation. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with this group being on time as presenters. Normally in these webinars, we're having to kind of push people along, but you guys have been very, very prompt. So thank you for that. More time for discussion later on. Our fourth presentation is going to be Richard Riels, who is the founder and executive director of SMELTS, also based in the US. Richard, I'm gonna let you get started.
Awesome. Thank you very much. My adventure has been a very human story for me in trying to save these animals. I started out disentangling whales and rescuing large cetaceans and porpoises and doing a lot of stranding work. And as an engineer doing this work, I started discovering that prevention was going to have to be a real focus of a need and a solution to these animals. Next slide, please. In New England, there's a very iconic whale, the North Atlantic right whale, and unfortunately, it is a very industrialized type of whale. It is literally swimming and foraging, birthing and calving in some of the most busiest areas of the United States and Canada. And they basically have very negative interaction with fishing gear and shipping. Next slide, please. 2 weeks ago, we were in Halifax, Nova Scotia, at the North Atlantic Right Whale and the Ropus Consortium meeting. And the North Atlantic Right Whale Commission announced this year's stats for how many animals we think are remaining. And, these are shocking numbers for these large cetaceans that are incredibly important for the health of the ocean. And they've just been having a very negative interaction with fisheries. And I set on this quest in 2012 to start a nonprofit to see if we could figure out how to stop this. Next slide, please. And I invented an acoustic valve technology and a lift bag system that we could basically put on fishing gear. And we discovered that, you know, ropeless fishing, or this on-demand fishing, was going to be a new technology that was going to move antiquated bottom set fisheries into the 21st century. And what we discovered is we built this new lifting engine. It ended up becoming it's actually a new machine for the ocean. And it's very powerful. It can lift fishing gear, it can lift archaeological equipment, it can lift shipping and marine debris. And we're able to now, we've been starting to see if we can place the gear with working class ROVs. And but the ultimate goal for us was to remove the persistent vertical line in fisheries. And this is what we set out to do. Next slide, please. So in 2018, I set out to try to find some pioneering captains, and I was very fortunate. I connected with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and some of their senior scientists really liked this invention, this idea I came up with, using acoustics, compressed air, and a lift bag, basically a negatively buoyant technology. I basically call it the inflatable anchor. It's very stable on the sea floor. It stays put. And we started discovering that setting the gear traditionally, like a lobster trawl here, with no vertical lines and no buoys, the gear was really staying in the location that we thought the gear was, compared to having surface influence from a persistent buoy. Next slide, please. And this vessel here, the Resolve, incredible pioneering captain, Rob Martin. He's been fishing our gear since 2018, and we still have original units that we built that he still has in the ocean today. And Rob has been an incredible spokesperson for moving on-demand or ropeless gear into the fisheries and showing other fishermen that this is totally possible, and that there's areas that have large closures. Massachusetts has the largest closure in our country. It's up to about 6,000 square miles now. That we're building a tool to allow these fishers to get back into their fisheries. And Rob has been an incredible spokesperson and educator, and all of us that have been working with him have all been putting technology on his boat, including Kortney. And you know, he's like our guinea pig, and he's been an incredible human to show that this is possible. Next slide, please. This is Rob and his sternman, Kevin, and this unit is a very unique unit that we worked together with the fishermen. And what we did is we actually built a fishable on-demand trap. And this unit actually has our acoustic system built right into it. And Rob sets it on the end of his trawl, and he's actually capturing lobster with the acoustic device. And some of the senior scientists that we've been working with, they would like to see this move further into the future and be able to have these non-persistent vertical line fishing technologies that basically can come up to the surface with actual catch in the system. So these are these prototypes we've been playing with, and they've been really working well, and Rob's been catching a lot of lobster with them. Next slide, please. This is the gear breaking the surface, and you can see a very important, smart piece of technology next to our on-demand gear, and that is a Blue Ocean Gear Smart Buoy. I met Kortney in 2017 at the 6th International Marine Debris Conference, and she gave this amazing presentation, and I went and spoke with her and said, I want to stick your buoys on the bottom of the ocean. And she's like, well, those aren't designed for that. And I said, well, we're going to work on that. And she's like, well, what are you doing? And we're ropeless gear. We want to be able to relocate this gear that has no persistent line in a surface buoy. And when the fishermen come out back to their fishing ground and they deploy this, dolphin call, this acoustic signal to this gear, and it reappears, these acoustic signals have a pretty far-reaching grasp, and they could actually trigger gear almost a mile away. So I was very concerned at the very beginning of this of how would we relocate this on-demand type of gear? How will we refine it? How will we make it efficient for the fisheries? And lo and behold, Kortney was already working on it, and this amazing piece of technology that we pretty much don't use any of our gear without her smart buoys. It's a marriage, and it's really has proven to be an incredible piece of technology married with this on-demand gear, and what I believe will be the future of fisheries, at least for bottom stowed technology, is this type of configuration where you have a rope on command or an on-demand system, and you have these GPS type devices that relocate the gear quickly. Next slide, please. And for our system, it's pretty easy for the fishermen to manage. All they have to do is basically just deflate the lift bag. It has a small little handle and a check valve, and they just roll it up and they stuff it back on the top of the side. They throw it out of the way and they haul like normal. Next slide, please. And again, I don't need to say how incredible these smart buoys are, but they have really changed the face of what I believe will happen for on-demand gear, and showing that this technology can be and efficient for the fishes if they don't have to spend a lot of time trying to relocate the new reader fish.
Richard, you're breaking up a little
Next
bit
slide,
at
please.
the end. Can you hear us?
Can you go to my next slide?
There you are. I think we may have lost you for a minute, but you've come back.
Okay, sorry. In this picture, SMELTS has been pushing a lot of development for the fisheries, for efficiency and safety. We've been really trying to address safety for the fishermen to make sure that if we're going to add a new piece of technology to their day, that we're doing it the best way that we can. And in this picture, you can see we have one of our units, and then right behind the unit, we've actually installed the transducer or the speaker right into the ship's hull. And that removes a lot of tanglement risk and a bunch of wasted time that the fishermen don't have to, or the fishers don't have to really deal with. So we've been working really hard on building these technologies and trialing them and getting direct feedback from the fishers. To wrap it up for me, the whale entanglement community approached me after about 3 years of us building this gear. And one of the disentanglement directors asked me, could I build a unit that they could use to recover whales that were anchored and marine debris and ghost fishing type of work. And the GGGI gave us a nice little grant, and we were able to build some incredible technology that is just beginning to be tested in these anchored challenge problems that the fisheries, basically has an effect to. But we're trying to build tools for the disentanglement team so they can actually get the gear off the whale. And this lifting engine is starting to show that it has other uses outside of just removing the persistent vertical line. It can recover pretty much any kind of heavy gear on the sea floor. It's only related to the efficiency of the bag and the air capacity that we carry, which we can bring up 10,000 pound units or an 80 pound unit. So it's very modular, and it can be changed to the application that's needed. So it's a really neat little tool that we've discovered, and we're excited to partner with more GGGI groups and see what this little machine can do for us. Next slide, please. And so thankful for this group and all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes and all the collaboration and partnerships. The relationship I've had with Kortney has been so incredible for our work. And last year, the first exempted fishing permit in the Massachusetts closure was allowed, and our technology and Kortney's and another company, EdgeTech, and we had 200 right whales swimming over our gear. And it was a huge monumental, piece of work that we've all worked so hard to show that whales can coexist with fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. And again, great to hear about all of our members and having the opportunity to work together. And I know I work pretty closely on one of our projects out in the New England area. And so hearing some of these success stories are always really great, because it can be a real sticky issue. And so hearing some victories is always great and inspiring to keep going. So thank you for that. Last but not least, we have Helge Tretto Olsen, who is the CEO of RESQUNIT, joining us from Norway. And I am excited because this particular device that he's going to share about is a little bit different than some of these other ones that you've heard about so far. So take it away, and thank you again.
Awesome, thanks, and thanks to everybody who participates, and thanks for inviting me to present. I think the first slide is the movie, so let's try to show that first.
My name is Sig Hansen, and I've been a commercial fisherman all my life. I've seen a lot of pots lost. I feel terrible about it. When you lose a pot like this, it's fishing for years and years and years. It's still doing damage to the environment. We've often thought, is there a way to stop this?
Et eksempel I løsningen som nettopp utviklet for tegner av RESQUNIT.
And I'm very interested in RESQUNIT. I've seen it actually in action in Norway. It's a very simple solution to a larger problem.
Next, please. So what we see in many of the countries that we operate in is kind of what you see on this picture here. Particularly when you talk about government's effort, there's a lot of resources going into cleaning up, which is very important, of course. But what we offer at RESQUNIT is to turn off the tap in the background there. So if you just click on the next slide, I will. The way we turn the tap is with this product. So even though we have Sig Hansen, as you saw in the video, that is an offshore fisherman in Alaska, our product is mainly aimed at the inshore fisheries. So Dungeness crab, lobster, stone crab, blue crab, a huge market for us, and also maybe one of the most important markets in terms of where ghost fishing happens most. Close to shore is where the biodiversity is the richest. The traps that are lost in shallow waters, they catch the most diverse species in them, according to testimonies from a lot of the divers and organizations we are in contact with. So in case it wasn't clear on the video, the way we recover the fishing gear is that this you see on the picture here is a backup buoy. So it has an internal spool of rope. It's a timer release. So there's an electronic timer that you can set with an app. You can set it for anything from 1 minute to 5 years, and it resets automatically. At the cornerstone of our focus from the beginning has been to make a product that is affordable for the fishermen to buy it as it brings them economic value, and also that it's easy to operate. So after the initial setting of your desired release time, there's no user interaction needed whatsoever. The fisherman does what he does best, and that's to fish. In the case that he loses his primary buoy for whatever reason, this buoy here will come up at the agreed upon time, and there's an internal spool of rope attached still to the trap, so he can then retrieve that trap. Next slide, please. And this is a finished product. This is a product that is being mass produced. We have produced so far 5,000 units, and we have sold, I think, around 4,000 of them. And we are a global company, so we sell these products basically all over the world. But what we see is that it's for different purposes here and there. Some use the device for what we intended it for, recovering lost traps to mitigate the problems around lost fishing gear. Some customers use it as a ropeless system, where they actually use our device as a primary buoy. And this is mostly to avoid poaching or mostly poaching, I think. There are some scientific gear, expensive gear that has been protected or being backed up by our device. And we also see a trend with also some of the ropeless systems we see in here tonight. We see in the future more and more technology being added to trap. which will increase the need for a backup solution, at least an affordable one like we have. It's not a big investment, and it gives you a second chance to get your gear back in case you lose it. Next slide. This is just to show, for those of you who don't know, Sig Hansen is known from Deadliest Catch, just in the middle of filming season 20, and he's been on since the beginning. He is one of the biggest shareholders in the company, and he's provided us with great knowledge about the industry and helped us in the product development. Next, please. These were some statements from the Norwegian Marine Institute. They had our buoy on a test a couple of years ago. There were some concerns around the design of the buoy and so forth, so they did a lot of testing on it. And they found that the buoy is, despite of its kind of flat design, it's clearly visible on the surface. There is sufficient buoyancy even in some currents, and the respooling and the rearming of the product is very quick and easy after deployment. Next, please. We see in particular growing interest, not only from the industry, but also from politicians worldwide. Here is a picture on the left with me and the Minister of Fisheries in Prince Edward Island, the previous one. He just announced his candidacy for, he's running federally, trying to become the Minister of Fishery federally in Canada. In the middle, we have the Minister of Fishery in Nova Scotia, along with our global sales manager, Eric Nabi, who is stationed in Halifax. And then we have a politician on the right here. He is the Minister of Fisheries in the Azores. It's an autonomous region out of Portugal, a group of islands. And a few months ago, this minister here decided to purchase one of our units for every licensed traps in the Azores. And thinking back to the guy in the kitchen trying to clear the room of water, this guy sees it the way we want politicians to see it. And that is that by preventing gear loss here and now, the fishermen are saving the governments and the society enormous costs in the future. We see cleanup operations now where they clean up traps at an average price of $350 per trap. It's not sustainable. If you lose 30,000 traps like they do inshore fisheries in Norway, that amounts to actually cleanup cost at that price at a $10 million per year. So it's not sustainable to attack this just after the fact in cleaning up. We have to do something that works preventively. Next, please. And some of the instruments that we think politicians could utilize in incentivizing fishermen to make use of such a new technology. I just listed a few here. There are subsidy arrangements. The Minister of Fishery in the Azores decided to subsidize it 100%. It could, of course, be less. We see good arguments for increasing fishing seasons for people who fish sustainably, and also increase quotas. And there's also in Canada a tag system that we think is pretty interesting, where each fisherman get one tag for each of their traps. In the case they lose some traps, they have to reapply to get new tags. They can't just go to the store and buy 10 new traps. They have to get the tags that go along with them. That could be extended to where you can't get new tags within the same year. You have to wait until next year, which would also incentivize fishermen not to use gear, use new technology to prevent gear loss. Next slide. In addition to the product we have, we are developing our product further, and we're adding technology. This is a device that we have been playing around with for quite some time. We're looking to add GPS technology on there, so it'll say hi when it pops up. You can see where it is. We're also looking to add sensors to harvest data from the seafloor. And we are very interested in data such as temperature, depth, salinity, and dissolved oxygen. That will provide some more knowledge about the oceans, maybe some valuable information to fishermen so that they can fish smarter. Next, please. We have done projects in many places, one of them funded by GGGI. We've been a member since 2020, I think. did a project in Jamaica that was very successful. We got a report back this summer. Fishermen, they said that they lose a lot less gear. It's a great tool for them, as their traps are very expensive, and they are not the wealthiest fishermen in the world. So losing traps for them are quite harmful to their economy. So having a simple solution to avoid that is something that they appreciate. Next, please. This is just a map of a national park in Norway called Rae National Park. It's a very rich recreational fishery there, lobster fishery. There has been done a lot of research in the area, so it's a very well known and mapped area. And we are trying for next year to establish a large scale project there involving some of the universities in Norway, to create the evidence that we need, and that will hopefully back up our claim that we will, with our product, be able to reduce the loss of fishing gear by up to 90%. Next, and I think maybe that was it. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Helge. That was a great presentation, and to all of our speakers, it's so neat to hear all of the different overlaps, but also how different each of these products are, and how unique they are, and how all of you are thinking about not only working with different types of fishing communities, different types of fishing gear, but also things like, well, what do we need from our politicians? What do we need from our fishery managers and things like that, which it really reflects, I think, kind of the philosophy of the GGGI, and that it's not just about one stakeholder group or one approach, but it's really about bringing together folks from kind of all over the seafood sector to address this issue. So thank you so much for all of those presentations. For people on the line, we are going to start our Q&A session. As a reminder, you can either type your question in the chat. Chloe, I see your question. I will make sure that that gets asked in the course of this discussion, or you can use the raise hand feature, which it should be under, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should have the option for reactions, and then one of the options is to raise your hand. And so I will call on folks. But to get us started, I'm going to toss out kind of a general question to all of our panelists. Whoever would like to chime in, please feel free. But I kind of have teased over and over again, I heard a lot about the importance of collaboration, not only in designing your products, but trialing your products and things like that. And I would just love to hear a little bit about what that means to you at your different companies, and what that looks like. Because as we all know, like it can be hard, right? To say, like, take this very expensive piece of equipment, go out and put it in the water, and let's hope that we can get some information back. So I'd love to hear what collaboration looks like for you, and how all of you approach that in your work. And if I don't get volunteers, I will be mean and pick people.
I'm happy to go first on that one. I think it's super important to work with stakeholders, whether it's fishermen or whether it's regulators or scientists. I think that engineers can't design in a vacuum. You can stay in the lab all day and design stuff, but until you go out on the water, you don't know if it works or not. And you will get the most valuable feedback in one day out on the water with a fishing vessel than you would in 3 months of working in the lab. So we've always really prioritized working with the folks that are out on the water, and getting their feedback and inputs on what we're doing, not just mechanically, but also just how they interact with it, how and they come up with the best ideas. And then I think also, and it's been alluded in a lot of the talks today, is collaboration and partnership with one another. I think we've worked on projects together or in partnership with several of the other companies on this call, and it's it does. There is no one way that ghost gear gets prevented. There has to be a lot of different ways, and I think working together has been extremely valuable in coming up with that ecosystem that can help.
Thank you, Kortney. Do any of our other speakers want to weigh in on that?
I will. Sorry. For us, as hard as it is, grassroots has made the most impact for us, and probably why I'm so tired. We are on the water as much as we possibly can be. We're with the captains, we're with the government, we're with state officials, we're with enforcement. You pretty much have to be there to be present to really solve these problems. So our organization works really hard to be where we can be and try to, really listen to the industry, because that's how we've learned the most. We listen to what they are worried about, concerned with, and that's why we were the first ones to put the transducer in the hull of the vessel, because we kept hearing from the fishermen over and over, I'm tired of tripping over this speaker wire, right? Can you guys come up with another way? And so I went back to our acoustics experts and I said, let's build these and we'll put them in and we'll trial them and we'll begin this. And that was revolutionary to the fisheries when playing around with this new acoustic technology. And then it didn't take very long before all of a sudden these other captains are reaching out and saying, hey, can you cut a hole in my boat? I'm like, you want me to cut a hole in your boat? So it's for us, it's been so much of just being with them, like Kortney was saying, is just being on the water. But we have to also listen to the public. We have to listen to the restaurants and the seafood industry. We have to listen to all these other groups that are weighing in now. We have shipping and wind becoming part of some of these negotiations and talks. And it's really about bringing us all together and actually working and grinding through some of these really hard questions. And I mean, we are making progress, and humans are good at it when we actually put our minds together.
Thank you. And then Kathryn, I think you had something you were going to say as well.
Yeah, I just totally echo what both Kortney and Richard have said. Like, it's absolutely crucial to work with the industry when you're designing any of these products. And at least on our end, it's also been really interesting involving the industry in these projects, because they're the first ones that want to know, how can I be better? How can I do things better and reduce my impacts and not have such a footprint on the ocean. So it's been really great to involve the industry in our projects, and then from there it's always a challenge, but it's always fun also to find that kind of common ground that you might have with other organizations that are totally outside of your normal sphere. And that's been something that we've really valued with, for instance, Tangaroa. They've been really open to working with us in finding that common ground and, okay, how can we work together and how can we benefit each other? So for sure, I think collaboration is key for anything, and especially obviously when we're talking about the protecting the oceans, it's crucial.
If I can just add something, is that okay?
Yes,
that hasn't been touched upon, that is kind of relevant to what you're asking about.
Absolutely, and then I'll pass it to Stephen after you.
I have, and I think many others have also, a newfound respect for just making a product. It is so hard, and it's so much work that goes into it. So if you haven't done it and then you're planning to, just don't do it. Just do something else. It's hard. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, it's extremely hard, and it's even exponentially harder if you're going to throw it in the ocean, right? Yeah, like it's exponentially harder than land and air. And then I agree with everything that everybody said. And if you're looking for R&D funding for any project now, I mean, the more collaborative cross-functional partners you have on an R&D grant, the more likely it's going to get funded, right? So, you try to partner with an academic institute, you try to partner with the Fishing Association, you try to partner with somebody like GGGI, and the more stakeholders you have on any particular application to bring a different perspective to what you're trying to solve, the more success you're going to have. And even cross-border almost any proposal that I'm coming across now is trying to foster collaboration between Canada, US, Europe. So, you know, they're global issues, and we're all trying to address global solutions. Therefore, you should have global partners.
Well said. Thank you all. I guess kind of picking up on some of that, I was remarking to Laura as we were preparing for this conversation, you know, all of you as our speakers today, you're some of our corporate members with the Triple GI, and I was a little nervous. I was like, oh, these guys are all competitors with one another. Is it going to be tense? Is it going to be awkward? Is it going to be uncomfortable? And you know, as kind of evidenced by Richard and Kortney, your presentations, and also the rest of you, like, no, it really was. Kind of everybody was, one, a little bit different, but two, learning from one another. And so I'm curious to hear about what role the Triple GI has played in this work, and having kind of access to not only other technology companies, but maybe some smaller NGOs or directly with harvesters and seafood suppliers, and talking about that kind of mechanism and your journeys with the Triple GI. Kortney, I might pick on you because I know you and Richard, at least we're talking about collaborating with each other, and then maybe we'll get other folks building.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the collaborations that Blue Ocean Gear and SMELTS have done have been, you know, primarily in New England, and we've gotten we started partnering on grants together, federal grants together, from what I from what I remember from back then. And I think it's you know, that's been really good to have that sort of support. I think Triple GI has definitely encouraged and exposed us to a variety of different ways of looking at the problem, both how gear is lost, both from the outreach perspective, but also from different ways to tackle prevention. And I think having been on similar projects with RESQUNIT, for instance, seeing where the different types of solutions might be applicable, and you know, it just gives you a better understanding of where things fit in. I think Triple GI tends to come, you know, you have the value of looking at things from a very holistic scope, and identifying where there are the most needs for intervention, and where some of the communities are most at risk. And so that's been very valuable as well.
Any other thoughts there on Triple GI? Then in that case, I'm going to turn to some questions from the chat. So Chloe was asking about the cost of this equipment, and I might even take that a little bit further and just talk about access. I think technology is so fascinating, but obviously there's a lot of money that goes into the research and development of all of this, and so many of these products are understandably expensive. And so how do we think about giving or making these types of things more accessible in places that are maybe not Canada, the United States, some of our kind of European countries, and thinking about the role of access and technology in addressing this issue as well?
I'll take a stab at that for sure. That is a very awesome question, because this is what I believe that the role that the GGGI has is continuing to educate the rest of the world and look for opportunity for collaboration to expand these technologies into other trialing areas that might not be a priority that we would think, but actually is a very much a priority for the region that's dealing with their local fisheries problems, their marine mammal entanglement problems. So these networks allow us to really expand the work that we're doing in other parts of the world that would never even understand what we're actually accomplishing, are able to see this. And then I think what that does is it opens opportunity for funding and partnerships and other grants, and maybe even international type of funding grants. And that's some of the stuff that we have really enjoyed doing and collaborating, because then it puts a skin in the game for everybody if you write a international type of grant and you have 3 or 4 companies that are coming together to provide a solution to another region that would probably not have an opportunity. And that's why we're a nonprofit, because what I started to do in the very beginning is I wanted to build technology that I knew was going to be very expensive to really develop and understand if it would work in the ocean, and definitely would it work for fisheries. So we basically took all of the funding that we were getting, and we still do this. We build our gear, we hand it over to the fisheries, at no charge to them. So we're trying to build more inclusion and more opportunity. But eventually, these are products, and somebody will have to pay for them. But right now, SMELTS works very hard in talking to both federal governments in North America of subsidizing large grants and building programs that will allow captains that want to try this a chance.
Stephen, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want, like, it might be a bit of a dream, but my vision, like, to get to Chloe's question in the chat, cost versus conventional equipment. Yeah, I mean, rope on command systems are not cheap, and it's definitely a prohibiting factor when you talk to fishermen. And if you look at the crab and lobster industries in North America, they're very lucrative, and the cost of a zone closure and not being able to fish is more than justification for the cost outlay to enable you to fish when otherwise you wouldn't. But if I'm in Portugal and I'm talking to an octopus fisherman and an octopus trap is 10 euros, there's no way that I'm going to be able to convince an octopus farmer, a fisherman in Portugal, to attach a $2,500 unit to a 10 euro trap, right? The business model's not going to make any sense. So what I would love, and I don't know how far away we are. I mean, I would love to be able to give our system to fishermen and anybody that wants to use it at no cost. And I actually want the fishermen to be incentivized to use it. And I actually think that they can make more money per pound by virtue of using it, because I think that consumers are willing to pay more per pound for crab and lobster that's caught in a whale-safe, environmental friendly manner. And the technology is such that you can track the catch from the trap all the way to the retailer, and the fintech digital side of the technology is such that you can monetize the transactions from the retailer back to the fisherman. So if you're making a dollar a pound more because you're using this system, then some of it can go to the fishermen themselves. Some of it can go to financing the gear that was given up front, and part of it can go to an environmental fund in the local community. But that's a business model that's in my head that I talked about when anybody's interested. But we're a long way from making it a reality. But that's the direction I'd like to go.
Thank you so much. And Helge, I also see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so even though we have a kind of low-cost product that is affordable to the fishermen in our part of the world, in Europe and in North America, we got to remember that there are many fishermen in countries that just can't. When a fisherman in our part of the world loses a trap, it's more annoying, it's irritating. But when a fisherman in many other parts of the world loses a trap, it's actually a threat to their livelihood. I mean, they can't absorb the losses of losing fishing gear. So I appreciate that there are programs such as the Ghost Gear Fund, I think it's called in Canada, that is not just national, it's international, so anyone can apply for them. We also have a similar program here in Norway, funded by something called the Retailers Environment Fund, where income from the grocery plastic bags actually goes back to reducing plastic pollution. And it's also an international program. So I appreciate many countries in the Western world setting up program programs for artisanal fishermen in poorer countries to utilize funding to also be able to participate in using such technology and have that as a security for their livelihood.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. I wanted to turn to Moffat's question in the chat. Moffat is with Go Green Malawi, and he asked whether or not these technologies work only for the ocean, and mentions that they have a similar problem in Malawi where there are big waves and southeastern winds. The fishermen lose a lot of their gear. Any experience trialing these? Helge, I imagine yours would work easily in freshwater, but I'm curious about the others.
Yeah, ours will work in all types of water.
Sorry, on our end, they would work just fine as well. Yeah.
Yeah, same. We have folks using them in the Great Lakes.
Yeah, we've done some crawdad gear in freshwater. We had some crawdad fishermen that have been very interested in it. The water doesn't matter. The ocean, actually, freshwater is a lot easier. It doesn't dissolve the product.
As is, we've heard that in many plastics issues. Freshwater is a bit easier than the ocean. Okay, and Joel, you mentioned to me that you also have a question.
Thanks, Jackie, as Zoom catches up with me. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so one question that I had, and this came up in the Halifax workshops that were referenced once already in the workshop, and it's come up again at the International Conference on Ghost Gear. Well, actually, in side conversations, but not in the main thread that we had in Norway last week. And this is when we're talking about ropeless gear, or on-demand gear is probably a better way to describe it in general. One of the concerns that was brought up from fishers was that when you have multiple fisheries happening in the same area, the surface buoy is what tells a trawler, for example, say a scallop trawler, if you're talking about the lobster fishery in the Bay of Fundy, for example, that there is a lobster trap or a string of pots there. In the absence of that buoy, the trawler no longer knows that there is a pot or a string of pots there, and so they may just go right through it. And I know this happens even when there are surface buoys, so let's put that out there. We do understand, but I think this is something that Stephen, you and I had spoken about in Halifax, is how important is it for these technologies when they're out there to communicate with one another so that other vessels can actually see them? Because a lot of the time you have proprietary technologies which communicate with one another, or you can see others of the same brand or the same type, but not all of them. And what we don't want to do is create an unintentional consequence where now that if in the removal of, for this specific circumstance, if there's no surface buoy, other vessel traffic can't see it. And if they're trawlers, for example, driving through it, then you might cause unintentional lost gear that way. So how important is it, again, for this collaboration piece for companies to communicate with one another and make sure that everyone can see everyone's stuff when it's deployed?
I could go first. Joel, how are you, sir? So that is a very important and incredible question. Matter of fact, in 2 weeks, we're all gathering in Boston. NOAA's basically hosting the interoperability workshop for marking technology. And there's for this to move further than a small little exempted fishing permit fishery or these little trials, we have to get this right. And there is a lot of challenge to this because the physical buoy is a very simple way of marking something in the ocean. And it's not necessarily just fishing gear, but there are amazing technologies that are emerging. And I think not only are we going to discover that we're probably going to come up with better ways to mark gear than we do now, even with a physical vertical line and buoy. For example, SMELTS has been marking gear on the sea floor since 2019 because we use acoustic modems. So our modem is able to talk back to the ship and tell us exactly its range, its bearing, and its distance. And we just added a feature where we know the depth as well. So it verifies these slant range calculations, these algorithms that have been developed for acoustics for many years. And we're discovering that it's really accurate, really close. And then we retrieve the gear, and the smart buoy reappears, and boy, it pins it really close to where we had these basically waypoints positioned. Now, one of the big challenges that everybody's worried about is how do you let a scalloper know that this technology is out there? And one of the strategies is using cloud databases that you are able to populate that information back in the helm to another moving ship and do it in real time. And this is done by AIS already, the automated information system that keeps ships from basically colliding with each other, very similar to what jets do. And so there's very good known technology that we're already working with. It's now just adding this seafloor component. SMELTS has been building, we have this, we call it the skipper scan. And what we use is we use scanners that are directly connected to satellites, so they're GPS scanners. And then we put radio frequency identification tags, transponders in every trap. And when they go off the vessel and then they return on the vessel, these are marking, cataloging, and inventorying all of the technology. And then when it does it, it's actually giving a waypoint. So we might have a more accurate trawl line than having two buoys out in the ocean with big watch circles. We might actually see that the vessel was snaking and actually moving to the north. And it's hard to see that in a two vertical line buoy system in the ocean. So it might end up becoming a more accurate way for the captains that are moving through these regions to actually see this. So there is some amazing new emerging technology. I know Ashored's working on a bunch of amazing stuff, and some of the other groups. And I believe that we're gonna revolutionize and change the way that we look at ocean assets and make it better for the future forever, and hopefully reduce a lot less ghost gear. The one beautiful thing that wrapped the story up, we had a trawl that was basically gone through by scallop gear, and it parted the trawl in half. And if it didn't have an acoustic system on it, that gear would have been lost forever. But NOAA allowed the captain to go out and do acoustic ranging, and they discovered it, and he recovered it. And that captain became a believer because he recovered $30,000 worth of technology. So not only would that gear be lost and be basically marine debris and ghost fishing, it brought back his catch and his technology. So he became an instant believer. And I believe if we put smart technology on the sea floor, we want to bring it up automatically if there's going to be a failure. If it's going to start crashing or the battery's dying, we want to recover that. And then the smart buoy becomes our safety net. Now we know the gear has returned. So there's some really neat new strategies that are being presented, but we have to come up with how can we all be interoperable? And that's something that the feds are going to have to make some hard decisions on.
That's super helpful. Stephen, I'm going to turn it to you, and then I have, I think, probably time for one last question in the chat from Patrick, and we'll wrap things up. So, Stephen?
I mean, just Richard answered the question beautifully, and I actually do believe that the gear marking with a ropeless system is actually going to be more accurate than a surface buoy with a long scope. In order for widespread adoption, interoperability between manufacturers is a must, and like Richard said, the event in a couple of weeks is and it is an absolute must. And not only that, so you need interoperability between rope on command manufacturers. You need interoperability with the scallop dragger that Joel talked about, that doesn't have any ropeless system, but they just need to know where it is. And then it gets a little bit more complicated as to what degree of privacy. You need to know that the gear is there, but you don't necessarily need to know who it belongs to. And then we're working on like geofencing things that, you have to be within, let's say, 2 nautical miles for the gear to pop up on your chart plotter kind of thing. So you don't want to be, you don't need to be 100 miles away knowing where everybody's gear is put. So it's a difficult question. But the technology is there to solve it, and we're going to solve it.
Thank you both. Knowing that I have about 10 other questions I could ask each of you, and we're coming up on time, but I do want to just maybe have this last chat or a question in the chat from Patrick about regarding the ropeless gear retrieval from Richard. What is the impact of the acoustic pinging on animals, specifically whales?
Yeah, that's a very great question, and that's actually going to be addressed at the interoperability meeting, because there's a frequency range from about 100 kilohertz down to 2 kilohertz, and the Navy is operating very low, 2 to 10 kilohertz. Science uses between 10 to 20, and then the ranges that we're playing around with is 20 to 30, which is really outside the range of at least large cetaceans. You move into the Odontocetes, and they can hear some of these high frequencies. But what it is, and this is how I explain it, and we've done a bunch of testing with NOAA. If your neighbor starts his lawnmower, it's annoying, and maybe it will change your pattern. You'll go inside and get a drink, but it's probably not going to harm you. And there could be potential some foraging changes or something like that. But these are incredibly fast bursts, and they are very hard to even detect. We put hydrophones in when we're testing, and what we discover is that the vessels are louder than anything that we're admitting into the sound and the water column. The vessels are incredible when the gear clashing and when you're changing direction. Though the noises from the vessels are so incredibly loud that it almost makes people not feel well when we have the hydrophones playing. So the little R2D2 chirp, I call it, is so quick and just dissipates so fast, and the sound processing on the seafloor side is so good that we're hoping that the multi-path or the multi-beam problem of putting a lot of sound in the ocean won't be a big challenge for on-demand gear. And again, we're going to address this at the interoperability meeting and make sure that we're all agreeing on the frequencies that we want to work in that are the safest for all the species that are going to have to deal with this noise.
Thank you. Appreciate that. With that, I think we are at time. I wanted to give a huge thank you to all of our presenters for just the wealth of knowledge that you shared today and for answering so many questions. I know I could probably have extended this another hour and kept going, but I think we all probably have other things on our calendars and our schedules. I also want to give a big shout out to Laura Walker, our GGGI coordinator, who helped me to put this on and run all of the technology in the background and keep us all organized, and to the rest of the GGGI team as well for all the work that they've been doing. Thank you all so much. As I mentioned, this will be on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So if there was a question you missed or something you'd like to go back and listen to, feel free to check that out there. And if for those of you who are coming up on the Christmas, Hanukkah, other winter holidays, happy holidays. And I think we'll probably be having another Let's Talk Ghost Gear webinar early in the new year. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.